Well, 1 year, 2 houses, and 1 moustache later, we are at the end of the big dry. Welcome to the Big Dry. It is a solo RPG. It's actually running off of a rule set by Sean Tompkins called Ironsworn, along with a few other little supplements to help make the game run. But basically, we are doing a whodunit. It is going to be me playing this game, but I actually don't know how it's going to end. That's the exciting thing. It's going to be up to me in order to put the puzzle pieces together in order to figure out whodunit in this crime, just like a real detective, or at least a real detective in a TV show would. Now, I did promise a notebook episode, but I've decided to give that a miss. This is, in fact, going to be the final episode of The Big Dry. So if this is the first time you've actually watched any of these, I really would highly recommend going back and watching the previous episodes in this series. Whether you go right back to the start or at least jump into the notebook episode about halfway through and then go from there to get all the clues, the twists and turns of what happened to David Race in his investigation of the murder of George Templeton in a recently dry New York City. But whether you have or have not, I can't tell you what to do. I hope that you enjoy this episode, but unlike most RPGs, tonight's episode, chances are, all going well, I'm only going to be rolling these dice once, because this is the episode in which we try and piece all of our random clues together and figure out who murdered George Templeton. So let me explain how this is going to work. Basically, in Ironsworn, they have a progress track in everything, in combats, in quests, and all that kind of stuff. 10 boxes. 10 boxes that you fill quickly or slowly, depending on how difficult the challenge is. So tonight, what's going to happen is a variation on that. I've been gathering clues throughout this entire case. All sorts of bits and pieces, from interviews, from investigating different crime scenes, different places. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to try and identify all of the clues that directly relate to the murder of George Templeton. Not the red herrings, not the extra things that are digressions and sidetracks, but specific clues that informed me as to who committed this crime. And I will place all of those in that 10 progression track thing. What then happens is I then roll the dice. And if my score, my number of clues used to explain how the murder was done beats the score of the dice, then I have indeed cracked the case. If I don't, then I missed something. Something has gone wrong in my investigation. So, let's get underway. Get yourself comfortable, fix yourself something delicious, and let's finish the case of the Big Dry. It is night in New York City. We've passed midnight, beyond the witching hour. It's dark, and it's cold, beastly cold, the kind of cold that makes you shiver, even though you're trying your hardest to keep warm. David Race, though, has other concerns on his mind. He limps closer and closer to the docks, legs jarred from trying to escape his brother with some British police force. His arm wrenched from jumping off that building. Broken glass, bullet wounds from previous days. The man is beaten down. This investigation really has taken it out of him. But now he limps towards what he thinks is the finish line. He makes it to Wanderer's Rest, the conspicuously quiet pub down by the docks. And not far away, you can see some boats. One boat in particular with a little bit of activity going on. Race spots this. He looks and he sees a figure on the deck of the boat, wandering back and forwards, apparently getting ready to depart. Race charges towards the vessel. "Darcy, please, Darcy! Darcy!" Darcy starts, he looks up and sees Race coming towards him at a limp, a bit confused. "Please, I need your help, sir, let me on your boat." Darcy's taken aback a little bit to see that British stranger dude he met in the bar previously now limping towards him, broken and injured. He takes a moment to recognize him, but he does recognize him. He recognizes him as the guy that he did give information to before. And technically, he owes him a favor, but he looks bad. He can't turn him away. So he lets him onto his boat. Well, my dear stranger, you look awful. What's happened to you? It's the police. It's the murder. It's everything. It's just going wrong. It's just going so wrong. They're after me. Everyone's after me. I see, my dear lad. Come on board. I'm about to cast off. I guess you seek the solace of the sea, then. Sure. The two men make their way onto the boat. They climb up onto the bridge, just a little cabin overlooking things. It's relatively small, but there's the wheel and there's a small chair, and Race gets plonked down on that chair. He is wounded, he is injured. In the cabin there is a bit of a first aid kit. The first aid kit can't really do anything for what Race is suffering from. He's got like fractures and bruises. There's not much this first aid kit can do. Make yourself as comfortable as you can as we cast off. I don't want to leave you in the condition that you're in. Captain, I know that your favourite haunt is closed down because you've been following the law, but there is no law against possessing alcohol at this stage. The old sea dog gives him a wry look. And sure enough, he does have, not rye, but another strong beverage beneath. He cracks it open. And he does have a glass to pour. And Race takes a drink. Can't tell you how good that is. Take it slow there. You do need to make sure that you drink responsibly. There's largely silence between the two men as the man that we presume to be Captain Darcy slowly takes the boat out from its little port into the river. The darkness almost envelops everything. The little light of the cabin offers fairly little solace in the abyss that's forming around them. The only real light beyond that is as they look back, they see New York City. It's 1919. The electric light is well and truly established in this city, but it's not ablaze. It's just a little beacon of hope, a shining light calling out, poor and huddled, to find a new solace. And the boat pulls away from this place. After some time, the boat comes to a stop and the engines are turned off. An anchor isn't dropped. The captain's wary enough to keep his eye out for any obstacles that they might run into. And he just lets the boat float for a little while. Well, my dear friend, you're in the right state. He's got something to do with Templeton's murder, I take it. Oh, god damn that name. It's just brought the end of me. It's brought me to ruin. Look at me, I'm a husk. So they assume that you committed the crime? I've committed crimes for sure that they would hang me on. But I don't think they'd want me for George Templeton's death. It's complicated. It's just so damn complicated. If murder was easy, I'd imagine more people would be doing it. True, I suppose, but you've got to understand that what makes this murder case so difficult is so many people involved in it are criminals and spooks. How do you mean? Well, the problem with a criminal committing a murder is you don't know which of their crimes is relevant to that specific murder. It all just gets befuddled in an awful nest of lies and conspiracies. Trust and mistrust. There's no honor among thieves after all. I see what you mean. It does make investigations quite difficult, which is why obviously most people leave it to the experts. I know, but there's so many things that even the experts would be thrown for, like this Miss Mayhern character that I believe you have some awareness of. I'm an old sea dog. I know lots of people. Yes, of course you do. But this Miss Mayhern, right? She's involved in some sort of smuggling racket, but smuggling people. Some of these people that you say are being kidnapped. Well, she's trying to act like a safe haven. She's acting against the British government, and to some extent even against the American government, in order to keep all these people safe. Acting in the dark to serve the light, you might say. Something like that. But you can understand that it means that she can't exactly act in the open. Everything's all shrouded in mystery and darkness. And you would think that she would be at odds with this Mr. Templeton, wouldn't you? I mean, firstly, on the surface, they appear to be enemies. He works for the British government in the kidnapping ring. But of course, as things always turn out to be, more complicated than that. You see, it turns out that at some point they were, lovers, friends, close at the very least. And now it appears that Templeton was a double agent helping Mayhern rescue these people from the kidnapping ring. An ancient bond is no basis for a working relationship, especially in deception. I agree. How could she possibly trust him completely, even if she really does know him deeply? How? Well, she has to be careful. She has to double check these things, mustn't she? So, I guess she does. You see, what happened the night of the murder? It was more than just the murder that occurred. This is the other crime stuff. Miss Mayhern came to meet Templeton that night at the bar. She was just collecting the artwork as her covered occupation allowed her to do. Templeton provides her with a briefcase of information, maybe future names of people going to be picked up, locations to move people around, that sort of thing. And unfortunately, they're witnessed by Patrick Instow, the colleague, and George is able to brush them off, but it wouldn't have looked good. Mayhern seeing Instow talking to Mayhern immediately after, it would have only made her suspicions even greater. But she had already put a plan into place. She was already suspicious of George. See, what you don't know, what most people don't know, because it's in the police files, is that actually in the air vent in George's room was a little bottle, something with some sort of sleeping sedative in it. It was in an air vent, and the idea was that the aircon unit would blow, and then that would blow the gas into the room, and from what I understand, enough of this stuff would cause you to pass out. That was the intention. I think Mayhern wanted George to pass out, to black out in his room. She would go back, she had access to a key, he had a system set up where she would have the key, then could deposit it in a little safe position inside the drawer in the room, and then get out without anyone knowing the wiser. I think her plan was to go in there while he was drugged and asleep heavily, and, rifle through his papers, have a look to see if she could find any information proving his guilt or innocence. Confirmation. That sounds devious. You don't know the half of devious. You need to understand that Mayhern was not the only person suspicious of a traitor. You see, there was this other associate of hers, Mark Colden. Mark Colden seems to be suspicious of everyone. He genuinely believed in the cause, it seems. He was willing to double check their associates, people who they had at safe houses. But it appears that no one trusted anyone. He didn't trust her. So he rocked up that night to watch them, to observe them. Again, he equally suspicious. I'm assuming he knew the plan to drug, but he wanted to make extra sure. He didn't trust Mayhern. So when Mayhern went to his room later that night, much later that night, she actually found Templeton awake. The drug hadn't worked. Was it faulty? No. You see, what happened was, Colden, pretending to be a bellhop, he got access to a room higher up, above Templeton's. And he had with him a long piece of barbed wire. The barbed wire, he attached some sort of magnet, from what I can guess, lowered it down through the aircon vents and actually lifted the bottle out in a way that allowed him to take it out without ever actually interacting in the room, never being spotted by either Mahern or George, because surely either of them may recognize him. But to what end? I think he wanted to force an altercation. I think the idea was he would take the drug out of the room, and then when Mahern arrived, he would be awake. He would see that she didn't trust him. There would be an argument, there'd be a fight. Maybe they would reveal all. And I don't know, maybe he's listening in from an air vent or just wanted to put flying in it. I don't know. But he thought that this was a way of smoking out either of them if they were indeed the traitor. And was either of them the traitor? God if I know. All I know is that the witness next door did not hear a fight. And when we found the body the next day, George Templeton had very clearly been in a fight. Colden's plan worked. He was indeed awake when Mahern turned up to the room. How do you know that? Well, if Templeton was asleep at that point, then anyone could have just killed him while he slept, smothered with him a pillow, I don't know, put some drugs in him, I don't know, something like that, and make it all seem like an accident or quiet or something. Not all violent with knives and gash wounds. He must have been awake. So what did Mahern and George do? I don't know, but they certainly didn't fight. Again, the witness next door heard nothing. Mahern went in, Mahern went out, and that was it. Maybe there was an awkward stare down. Maybe they reconciled. I don't know. Not a clue. But I bet you he was alive when Mahern left. And how do you know this? Because Colden put the bottle back. Colden put the sleeping draft back down in the vent. And the effects of the drug were found in George's system. If he had died, if she had suddenly attacked him and killed him silently somehow, then the drug wouldn't be in his system. Not anymore, at least. So the drug was placed back in his room, Mahern left, and even Colden, satisfied, dissatisfied with the result, I don't know, left. And it turns out all this drugging and bold-headed artists coming and going was all just a bit of a distraction, an important distraction. I think it was a bit of a motive to why the crime happened, but had nothing to do with the murder itself. So that leaves you at square one, I suppose. Well, not quite. I mean, the drug's back in the room. It's an odd concoction from what I understand. It does make you drowsy and eventually fall asleep. But you know, anyone could have come into that room at that point. Knocked at the door, he would have let them in. The drug probably wasn't in his system. Maybe somebody who even saw Mahern leave, potentially. And when they go into the room, they find George a little the worse for wear. And for whatever reason, they fight. Maybe George is not in his right faculty. You know, he's not thinking straight because the drug's in the room. He could have felt threatened. He could have felt that he was in danger. And maybe he started the fight. The knife did come from him after all. The knife was in his pocket. He took it out, they fight, the wreckage fighting, and then maybe he loses the knife. The opponent gets the knife and he strikes back. Cuts. Again, they may not have even intended to have killed him. They just gave horrible wounds to his arms. He passes out, they take the knife and they put it back into his pocket. Strange pockets. I mean, he had food in there, food from days beforehand. They put the knife back in his pocket. And then they leave. They'd hoped maybe that George would wake up and call for help or something. But he didn't. Because he was drugged. He bleeds out on the floor. So whether the murderer completely intended him to die or if it was just an unintended mixture of circumstances, I don't know. But again, anyone could have done that. George was a powerful man, but the drug really would have slowed him down. And he really would have made some very poor decisions. But as you say, anyone could have done this. And if anyone could have done this, as far as you don't know anyone. Well, it's not entirely true. You see, there's one bit of evidence that I find quite strange. There was a letter. There was a letter in the room, in the fireplace. And I don't know what was on that letter. Could have been anything. But for some reason, someone burnt it. I don't think it would have been George. George had access to the safe, both the hotel safe and the official government safe. He could have just put it back in there, and there would have been no way, except for government officials, to find what was on that letter. It could have been Patrick Instow. He could have done it. Roly-poly as he is. Again, George was drugged, but again, he had access to the safe. Whatever that document was, he could have hidden it. Now, of course, I've already pretty clear that Mahone couldn't have done it. Well, Mahone probably didn't do it, but she certainly had no motivation to burn that letter at all. Unless there's something even more incriminating on there. But I can't go off hearsay. So who do you think had motive to burn the letter? Someone who didn't have access to the safe to hide it. I mean, for all we know, George had already taken it out as a part of other documents, something like that in the room. But then he shut the safe behind him, left it locked. So whoever had that document, they couldn't put it back in the safe. And that person couldn't leave it out. I mean, they could have probably left it out, or Patrick would have come and collected it maybe, something like that. But then they don't want Patrick to see that either. No, the only person who didn't have access to the safe and would want to see that letter burned is the person whose name was on the document. You, Captain Darcy. As far as I can figure, you are the only person who would actually want to burn that letter, who would want to not be associated with this crime. Are you saying I burnt the letter? That I committed this crime? Look, I acknowledge it's quite a leap. I mean, I have to assume that you were there that night for some reason. Maybe some business dealings with Instow or Templeton. I don't know. But while you were there, you saw Mahone. I mean, you yourself said that you knew all these docks and the waterfront like the back of your hand. The oats business up north, the little secret front for this organization, I'm sure you must have seen it before. And a bald-headed lady, she stands out. And here you see the bald-headed lady going into Templeton's room. That's odd. That's strange. Well, you could go investigate. You've seen Templeton before. Templeton knows who you are. It's late at night, but, it's not unheard of in his line of work. Captain Darcy takes out his pipe. He slowly begins to load it. And of course you go in, you inquire, who was that person? And as I said, George was not in his right mind. The drug was beginning to enter his system. Good Lord, just the paranoia of knowing that he is a double agent and someone has spotted his chief contact in his room. That's got to make him afraid. It's got to make him concerned. And of course, it's foolishness that he attacked him. Would want to attack you. I mean, what would he do then? Put you down the rubbish chute? Call for hotel service to clean you up? But again, he was being drugged. He wasn't in his right mind. So he drew a knife on you. He tried to attack you. And of course, you defended yourself. Now, you're both big men. The altercation was probably wide-ranging. At some point, the knife comes free from George's hand. You fight some more. You get a hold of the knife. You strike back at him, horrible wounds on his arms. You're an adventurer after all. He grabs at you. He grabs at your clothing. You're an adventurer. You've got your old military uniform on. I can't help but notice that you've got a little bit of a fur around the collar there. I must admit this is a little retcon, but we said it was in a military uniform. It could be Air Force, He could have grabbed that. We did find fur in his hand after all. But eventually you get the knife and you attack him, and you didn't necessarily intend to kill him. You would have hoped that maybe he would call for help when he came to after you knocked him down, but he was drugged. His death sentence was signed. You take the knife, you carefully place it back in his pocket, bewildered by the food that you find there. And then, of course, you go to leave, turn around, looked at the room where the only evidence of your being there was a bit of violence. You didn't really touch anything, no fingerprints, no more than anyone else's fingerprints that are in there. But then you see the documents on the table. You take a double check, and indeed you see that your name is very clearly on one of those documents. You can't let that stand. You can't let that stay there. It's the only connection between you and George. If you can sever that connection, no one will know that you were ever there. You go to maybe put it in the safe, but you see the safe is locked. You have no access. You don't want to touch it any further than you've already touched things in the room. So you do the only sensible thing. You burn it. At that moment, Captain Darcy poetically lights his pipe. Now, you would assume that that would be enough in order to destroy it. You leave it behind. You need to get out of there as quick as you can. You let it burn, 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 and you leave. Closing the door behind you. I'm sure that it's locked. I mean, he lets you in the first place, so that the key's not an issue. And you silently leave. No one would ever know that you were there, unless they saw you, which no one did, or they discovered the burned letter. But unfortunately for you, and maybe you yourself were being affected by the drug, you were sloppy, and the note was not completely burnt. And I found that note. I knew there was a connection between you and the death of George Templeton. Maybe I'm the only person in New York who knows that. Captain Darcy takes a big draw of his pipe and blows out some smoke. And then he makes eye contact. Okay, so at this point, we actually get back to the game itself. We're going to come to the roll. So that's what I think that has happened. Just so we're clear, basically, Darcy was there at the hotel the night of the murder. I've got no real evidence that he specifically was there. But he saw Mayhern. He went in after George, because of the drug, was very addled. He thought, oh, Captain Darcy has discovered it all. He's attacked him. He was unable to beat him. Darcy fought back, and then hid all the evidence he could. Again, my main thing is the only person that has any incentive to burn the letter with his name on it is he himself. Is Mr. Darcy, is Captain Darcy himself. So that's my assumption. So let's go through the evidence that got me there. Okay, so we know that the murder occurred in conjunction with a fight because of the wounds on his arms and the wrecked room. We can also assume in the fight that was when the fur got ripped, and you can forgive me, let's assume that there was a fur on Captain Darcy. Like I said, he had a military uniform. We're going to take a bit of a leap. We're going to assume that he had like Air Force type. He's been an adventurer as well. He's going to have some attachments to his uniform. Maybe a piece of fur from some of the exploration, or maybe from some time in the Air Force, that kind of thing. We can assume that the motive was kind of self-defense, that George Templeton was not thinking in his right mind because the sedative was in the room and in his system. We know that. But we also know that the sedative had only recently been put into his system because Mark Colden had been doing the shifty stuff, raising and lowering the barbed wire. The barbed wire and the testimony of the priest guy that he got in trouble with because that was his room that he was using. We know he could have seen Mayhern because other people saw Mayhern going in and out of the room. The lady across the hall saw that. So that's why he went into the room to confront him in the first place. But equally, she left quietly, so she probably didn't do it. There needs to have been a fight in order to kill Templeton. She could have gone in theory, if all had gone well, killed him quietly. Plus, I don't know if she could have beat him in a fight. But as I said, the ultimate clue is the burnt letter. The letter with Mr. Darcy's name on it was out of the safe. So when he found it, he couldn't put the letter back into the safe so that no one would know where it was. So the safe was locked. But back to the letter itself. He is the only person who would want to burn that letter. Look, as far as the story goes, I feel the most convinced that he absolutely did it. So if we don't succeed in this role in a moment, it's going to be because we missed something, not because he didn't do it. But again, we'll roll. If he didn't do it, then we'll roll another chart to determine that. But that's my gut response in this story. All right, that's all I can honestly use. And let me know in the chat if you think some of the bits of evidence I've used are a bit shaky. But I genuinely think that there are pieces of evidence that but strongly imply that Captain Darcy committed this crime. So we've got here 8 pieces of evidence. 8 pieces of evidence that strongly suggest that Captain Darcy committed this crime. So what I'm about to do is I'm about to roll our little fate dice here, 2d10s. And just so we're really clear, the idea is simply this. I need to roll a 7 or lower on both of these dice, and I'll absolutely prove that Darcy did it. If I get a weak hit, then it's probably saying that he did do it, but we'll see what happens basically. Miss and I'm wrong, or I failed to get all the evidence together that I could have, or something. So this is it. 1 year in the making. Let's see if our investigations pull off. So here we go. This is it. There's no fudging it. The fudge dice, by the way, $8 I owe to the Cancer Council. I'll probably add a video of me giving them that cash at the end of this. But no fudging here. No tricks, no lies. Oh, I really hope this succeeds. Here we go. No 8s. Double 6. You're very clever, Mr. Ace. Very clever. You say you figured all this out in the last couple of days while also picking a fight with half of New York City. I must admit, it's not the strongest evidence in the world. But you know, I was hoping I maybe could trick you in some way to make you admit to your crime. Oh, I committed the crime. I definitely killed Templeton, but you're more or less correct. It wasn't entirely deliberate. Oh, I'm grateful you're confessing. I had this whole plan rigged up. And as I was saying food in the pocket, you're probably aware that it was meat, don't you? I was hoping to get you to say that by accident. Do you think this is some sort of dime mystery story? That's pathetic. No, I own up to my crime. Particularly when this smart busybody has allowed me to take them out into the middle of the Hudson River while horribly wounded. Ah, yes, I must admit that was the part of the plan I wasn't looking forward to. First question, is Captain Darcy armed? Yes, he is. Is he armed with a firearm? Yep. So we're entering the fray. Now, I don't think we can say that this was a surprise for Race. He did put himself in this situation after all. So it's going to be a face-off, face-to-face, with a bit of heart, which is not necessarily Race's strength. Oh, but it comes good. So it's a weak hit. Race has to take the initiative. With that, Race has his cup of strong alcohol, and like he did to Colden all those months ago, days ago, he flicks the alcohol into Captain Darcy's face. So whether it's edge or shadow, we +2. It's a weak hit. He inflicts some harm, but loses the initiative. With the Sun Spirit in his face, Darcy does reel back, but he immediately begins to just fire blindly in the direction of Race. So Race, wounded as he is, makes a dive for the staircase. So just so we're clear what I'm picturing, it's like a little fishing boat or tugboat type thing. It's got a tiny cabin, like a little crow's nesty type thing, a bit bigger than that, that they're sitting in, and a little staircase coming out down behind, down onto the rest of the ship. So basically, he's just like trying to slump his way down that staircase and away from the gunfire. It's another weak hit. So Race does more or less manage to make his way down the staircase. However, he only really does this in any way that he doesn't get injured, because he falls onto like sort of a bundle of ropes down the bottom. So didn't get injured, but the bundles of ropes does then more or less tangle him up as he's trying to get up and get away from the gunfire. Darcy steps into the cabin doorway and fires down the steps. Race just uses his brute strength just to roll and try and get out of the way. And maybe some of the rope, this thick sailor's rope, might even just catch the bullet a little bit. So +1, that's not good. Oh, but it's very good. We got ourselves a 7 against 2 4s. With the adrenaline just coursing through Race's body, he does manage to pull this off. The bullet would actually probably graze him more than it did, but it actually does get caught in the thick rope. And he's able to reef himself up and away, and he begins to run up forward along the deck, sort of darting his way through as he goes. He's actually heading towards the bow of the ship. And as he gets there, he then stops and he waits for a moment. He actually lets Darcy catch up to him. As Darcy sort of makes his way through the structure of the boat, Race calls back. Templeton, wasn't your fault. Are you really going to kill me in cold blood? Darcy makes his way up to the deck. He's been addressed. He points the gun square at Race. I'm an old soldier. You won't be the first person I've killed in cold blood. But this is exactly where Race wants Darcy to be, because we're about to finish this fight. Now, you'll remember last episode, Race was being traced by his other brother, Race, Johnny Race, connected to British intelligence, that kind of thing. He didn't like Patrick Instow. He knew he was a bad egg. But Race gave his brother Johnny his notebook with all his notes and an address to come and find him at that place to help. So Race is hoping that his brother is going to be there to save him. We have ourselves 8 on the progression track. That's why I had it dangerous, because basically he just needs to stall for time for his brother to turn up. 8 on the progression track. Last episode, I also rolled to secure advantage with Johnny Race for just such a moment as this, okay? So we're actually going to say that it's 9. We have to do the dice, the fate dice have to beat my 9 in order for this to go good or bad. Oh, here we go. Will he get shot? They say that in the sort of near-death experience, and maybe even in the experiences of people dying, that things seem to slow down a little bit. Whether that's the adrenaline coursing through your system, maybe something more supernatural is occurring. But David hears the trigger of the gun begin to slide back in this revolver. He can see the hammer and the glint of the light from the cabin change as it slowly draws back. He swears he can see the hammer begin its process towards the shell casing to fire. And just as the bullet is about to launch from the pistol, another man's arm comes in, raising Captain Darcy's arms to the sky, and the bullet fires hopelessly, helplessly, safely out into the dark river. Johnny Race is very quickly able to subdue Captain Darcy. He brings him down onto the deck of the ship. Johnny's a much younger man. Darcy's past his prime. The only reason why he was able to keep up with David Race was because David Race, of course, is so injured. He is only on 1 health after all. But indeed, they're able to bring this man down. He's able to bind him up with some of the ropes on the ship. And Johnny Race heard everything. Bound and gagged, Darcy is flunked down onto the deck of the ship, safely in sight, where both Johnny and Race are able to watch him from the cabin above. Not only does Johnny Race have Darcy's revolver, but he has a weapon of his own, of course. And the boat is slowly turned back to the lights of New York City. You know, it's a damn foolish thing you did there, David. David just sits there slumped in the chair that he was in before, looking at Johnny as he steers the ship. He can't muster a word to say. He's exhausted. He just looks up at his brother. Well, I'm just saying, you're not going to get everything you want. You are aware of that. Oh, what do you mean? Well, I think my word carries enough clout to prove that Mr. Darcy committed this crime. But either he claps up and is put away for the rest of his days, or he makes a plea deal with evidence on people like Instow and Templeton and, brings the whole racket down. I'm afraid, though, it's going to be one or the other, my dear boy. It won't be both. Are you saying that Darcy will be back out in the streets and I'd better watch my back? I'm just saying you probably shouldn't come to America ever again, regardless of the outcomes. No, I don't think I intended to anyway. Race's mind flashes back, not just to the loss of that man who fell over the edge of the building because of his meddling, but also the tone and the tenor of Bartney, how angry she was at what he did. And he may have solved this case, he may have brought justice, but he didn't bring justice to that stranger. Johnny, do you have any clue who that man in that apartment was? Does he? Angelo Paietti. He was an associate with the British military during the last war. He knows where some skeletons are buried. And he was willing to testify? Probably not. That's why he came to America. He didn't have any hope in our system. No, he never would have seen justice done for whatever happened. But now he's dead. And now he's dead regardless. Was it my fault, Johnny? Johnny pauses, looks out into the light, and thinks, probably, old boy. But your hands weren't the only ones that were bloodied. 2 brothers sit in the darkness. They don't know what to say. They know there was no heroes here. They know there was no righteous avenger doing the right thing. It's all black. It's all dark. No one knows what they're doing in this world of espionage, of war, of combatants trying to find a new home. No one knows what they're doing when they're trying to solve big issues like, issues of alcohol. It's all just people floating in the dark. And the 2 brothers don't know how to express this to each other. All they can do is look forward to the light. the lights of New York City, which for all its problems, its ups, its downs, its vices, its inequalities, its major problems, in that moment, it was the only light that could lead them to a place of safety. Well, that's it. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad that came off. So it was indeed Captain Darcy. There you go. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty chuffed. I'm pretty satisfied. That was, I don't know if you agree with me, but that was a story. That was a crime fiction story where I feel I played the part of detective, putting together all these pieces. Now, I know there's going to be some people out there watching and going, look, the only thing that determined that my guesstimation was correct was the random roll of the dice. That ultimately, it was just because this side landed face up, not another side. It had nothing to do with what was the actual answer to the question. But this is an RPG. This is a game designed around the idea that dice have meaning, that random mechanics can create story, can create feelings, genuine feelings, feelings of excitement, feelings of adventure, feelings of combat. And I think, why not feelings of being a detective? The fact that you were able to find all these random, disparate pieces of information rolled off of tables, conversations from NPCs, and we were able to take all that chaos and madness and piece it together into a cohesive narrative. And for me, that is kind of the purest form of RPG. Taking randomness and creating structure, creating something beautiful, at least creating something interesting. And I genuinely hope you enjoyed this series. I certainly did. There's other videos on my channel, so by all means have a look. There's another series I've started just with pure Ironsworn. I intend to do some more in the future. There's also the war game stuff on here, which you enjoy. That sort of stuff, that's on here as well. But again, thank you so much for watching. And I hope that you'll see me again in the future. This is Evan. Finish the big dry. Night. Thank you again for watching The Big Dry. I earned myself 8 fudge tokens throughout the course of this game, so that's $8 to the Cancer Council. Please go have a look at their website, cancercouncil.com. It's a worthy cause. Thank you so much again for watching, and hopefully you'll see me again in the future.